Well, David Roberts is the author of Volts, the remarkably good and insightful newsletter and podcast. You can subscribe to Volts by going to volts.wtf and become a paid subscriber to support David's work. He started his career at Grist in 2004, went to Vox after that, and has written for a variety of other publications. And he's kind enough to be a guest on this show for the third time in this show's 6-year history. David Roberts, welcome back to the show. How you doing?
Hey, bro. Good to be here.
I was listening to, in preparation for this episode, I was listening to a very good episode that you did right after the Inflation Reduction Act published, or was passed, rather. You recorded an episode recounting your career, following climate policy, following clean energy policy through getting your start in Waxman-Markey and that bill, which passed the House and then died in the Senate, and all of the things leading up to the Inflation Reduction Act. That was a different vibe at that time, I would say. I'm just curious where, just taking a step back, what's foremost on your mind right now in this moment, covering clean energy policy, writing about it, going through 2025?
Well, I wish I had some uplifting or helpful things to say at the moment. But honestly, it looks to me like since the beginning of the century, basically the 21st century, in the US, we've been running at this over and over and over with many different attempts, many different strategies, many different policies, many different theories of change, political theories. And it's always like, well, the carbon pricing thing didn't work. How about this? And the industrial policy list didn't seem to work either. And I am flirting basically with the conclusion that the U.S. political system is dysfunctional in ways that are so deep that there isn't, like the sort of the premise with climate people has always been, because they have to be optimistic to keep going. The premise has always been, well, there's something will work. If that strategy didn't work, like something else will work. But it's just starting to look like in the U.S. the progressing at the speed we need to progress is just impossible under current circumstances without something very deep and fundamental changing. I'm feeling pretty forlorn and hopeless these days. I'm sorry. I know that's not what people on podcasts want to hear, but that's the vibe right now.
Well, you mentioned the political theory, and on that episode, you talk about how the Waxman-Markey bill, this is the climate bill dating back to the beginning of the Obama administration. It had things like standards and industrial policy.
Yeah.
It had a lot to it, but it ends up becoming this cap and trade bill. And as you talk about it, it gets basically talked about and right-wing media as a carbon tax, and the focus becomes on a tax, right? And then now you fast forward to the Inflation Reduction Act, it is investments, industrial policy, and the political theory, as I understood, which you hinted at there, is you build up a lot of clean energy projects and jobs, particularly in red districts, right, or swing districts. It's going to be really hard to repeal that policy. Fast forward to 6 months into a new administration, they've repealed most of that policy.
Not that hard. I would say a couple of things about that. One is, I still think that theory of the case is basically correct. I just think that a year and 2 years into, it's not like other areas of social or it's not like other areas of policy where you can sort of make institutional changes that are big and visible quickly. Climate is about infrastructure. It's about building big things, and building big things is slow. So the real momentum of the IRA, like the visible investment coming in, the factories going up, all that stuff was just barely, 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 barely getting started. Like it was, we were just on the front end of it. You know what I mean? So like,
Yeah.
we don't really know what the political situation would have looked like if we'd had even 2 more years, much less 4 more, for all this building to get going, all these things to really get moving. I think if we'd had 4 more years to put it into effect, I think the theory would have played out. I think it would have become impossible to undo. I mean, I still think, in broad strokes, the theory is correct. It's just like it takes a long time to work, and there wasn't enough time between passage and the election for it to make the material changes that might have at least tested the theory properly.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. The other thing is Donald Trump is an N of one. He is a unicorn, politically speaking. There is not really anything else like him. um, there hasn't really been anything else like him in our history. So, um, it was the case that lots of Republicans spoke up for these policies as this was going through Congress. But um, that although that was a positive force pushing in one direction, the force of Trump pushing in the other direction swamps everything. Like Trump being scared of Trump, all of them are more scared of Trump than they are in support of anything. I mean, really anything. Like there's no policy they would defy Trump over. You know what I mean? Like so a lot of this is just downstream of kind of Trump's personal predilections and like whoever gets in his ear. I think a lot of the damage done on this was just a small group of really hardcore right wing types like Alex Epstein, all these sort of anti clean energy types. I think they got Trump's ear. I think they got in the office with Trump, and that's just really it. Like Trump got it in his head that he doesn't like solar and wind, and that just cascades through the party, and there's no resistance. So like, it's very, it's hard to test normal political theories in this circumstance because we're just not in a normal circumstance. So it's like there's no. I worry. I don't want people to overlearn lessons from this because it's really like Trump just distorts everything in ways that are difficult to disentangle.
Yeah, I think that's fair. What do you think? What was interesting? We started this podcast in 2019, the last of the first Trump administration, and what we saw during the first Trump administration was two things. One, we saw kind of a renaissance of climate action, but also climate policy and climate pledges, clean energy pledges,
Mhm.
and this was happening. While it was not happening in the United States at the federal level, you started to see a lot of cities and states act, right? Whether that was through new policies or new pledges, like I mentioned. What do you like? I guess broadly speaking, what do you think is possible, or what could be possible in the wake of this bill?
Well, I mean, that's a very good question. It was like, I mean, it's just anybody who's lived through it knows this just strikingly different. The first time Trump was elected, I think it was widely viewed as an anomaly, a weird one off quirk that happened because a bunch of different things came together all at once in just the wrong way. Timing was bad. So it was a little bit of like a fluke, and it inspired resistance. And so it did inspire actually quite a bit of climate action at the state and city level. It's The vibe is different this time. and it's almost, I feel like the vibe, as vibes tend to do, kind of flailed too far in the other direction. But like the vibe this time is like Trump gained, like we saw him what he did in his first term, and then brought it back, and he gained numbers. He gained voters in almost every demographic in almost every state. So it felt much less like a fluke and much more like a, oh, I guess this is us now. I guess this is what we want. I guess we're tired of woke and we're tired of caring about climate and we're tired of trying to be good and decent and welcoming. We're tired of trying to be better. Everybody just wants to be their worst self. So let's just do it, like fine. Everybody just gave in. There's the business community, like politicians, the billionaires, even Democrats just seem to be like, well, all right, I guess this is what we're doing. I guess this is what we want now. So there's not been that same there's not been that same rallying, that same spirit, and that's true in the climate world and energy world as well. That said, there are plenty of routes forward. Like things are going to keep moving forward. For one thing, the bill did not destroy everything. Did not destroy IRA completely. And actually, like if you followed it, depending on depending on what your expectations were going in, this is even better, either a better or worse outcome than you expected. Like it all depends on your expectations. But I'll just say, like, given what happened when the House came out with its version, which was surprisingly bad, and then the Senate came out with its initial version, which was surprisingly even worse, a lot of that got pulled back. So it's not as bad as it could have been. So the tax credits remain in place for basically everything except wind and solar and EVs, right? And that's
Yeah.
not a small caveat. Like wind and solar and EVs are the main tools for emission reductions. Like most of the emission reductions that the bill was modeled to produce came from those, but it left the tax credits in place for clean firm, nuclear, hydrogen, geothermal. The manufacturing tax credit survived. So we're we're in a better place on clean energy policy than we were before IRA. I'll just say that. As much of a letdown as it feels like relative to IRA, it is nonetheless there was some progress made. So there's going to be a lot of action in industrial decarb and a lot of those areas that did get funded. And then there's also all kinds of non-federal or even non-market places to work. States still need to work. There's a lot, I think, that can be done. I mean, last time Democrats sort of decamped to blue states to really show off their ambition, and we got excellent, excellent policy in lots of blue states now: Colorado, Washington. I think this time, I just did a podcast on Montana. They had some bipartisan housing reform bills. I think there are areas like permitting reform where there are lots of constituencies that want to move forward, that want solutions even outside of climate and energy considerations. So a lot of that clearing away sort of regulatory barriers to building, clearing away permitting, bureaucracy, all that kind of stuff. A lot of that stuff can go on in states. I always stress whenever I talk to people, PUCs, public utility commissions. Every state has a regulatory body that oversees the utilities in that state. And that regulatory body has an immense amount of power to shape the future of energy in that state. And by and large, they're mostly ignored because their proceedings are very boring. But like a little bit of pressure on those goes a long way. So there's that, and there's the hyperscalers, the data centers, the coming growth in electricity demand. That's not greenies. You know what I mean? Like that's
Right.
not libs who want that. Those are big companies with lots of money who want that for business reasons. They want a lot of power fast, and it's just built into the logic of the situation that if you want power fast, wind and solar are the fastest you can get, or a virtual power plant. Those are faster than, like, it's impossible to build a gas plant before 2030. Like the pipeline supply pipeline is just jammed up. So there are forces pushing for clean energy. So there's a lot that could happen, but it's going to be unsatisfying. It's going to be very distributed, very piecemeal. I think the dream of one big dramatic federal stroke that would sort of, you know, the dream for a dramatic step forward, I think might be dead for good now. I mean, I'm not even sure. I don't know when Dems are ever going to have a trifecta again at the federal level, or even if they did. I think a lot of people are gun shy now about these massive swings in policy back and forth. So I mean, I think a lot of this is just about people coming to peace with the fact that progress going forward is going to be scattered and all over the place, and one step forward, two steps back, and half a loaf. There's just gonna be, and it's gonna be small ball at a city, states. Most of this, globally speaking, most of what matters in climate change is happening in China anyway. China and India, Vietnam, those countries. So, we're not as pivotal as we once were in this whole thing, but we're still there's still going to be stuff. I mean, anybody who wants to engage and try to make progress on this, there's still plenty of places to go and try to do that.
Yeah, I've heard you talk recently about the United States versus China when it comes to the energy transition we're going through. What do you think we look back 10 years from now on this moment? What do you think that will have meant for the United States and for China?
I have never in my life felt less confident in predicting anything at all. I mean, a week from now, never mind 10 years from now. I mean, I've just completely failed to anticipate almost everything that's happened in US politics in the last 10 years. So, like, I don't know why you're asking me. Like, you know,
I don't
nobody
know.
nobody knows anything. I mean, I can see there are, like, the error bars when I look forward are so huge. I can imagine a utopia. I can imagine a dystopia. I can imagine anywhere in between. And any of those seem plausible to me. So, like, I genuinely don't know. Like, if you're just asking me based on the facts in evidence, based on what's in front of us, 10 years from now, we're going to look back and say, this is where China formally took the lead, took charge of this global effort. And this is where it became clear that the world was going to be divided into oil importers who are trying to escape oil and who are trying to electrify, and declining petrostates that are attempting to maintain the market for fossil fuels as long as possible as they decline. And it looks to me like this marks the US choosing to join that latter group. Uh, with the Saudis and the Russians and etc. And that's tragic to me. I think the US will be much less prosperous than it otherwise could have been. I think the world, like, as down as people are on the US these days, I think a world order in which the US was sort of in charge and the policeman certainly has its flaws, but I think we're going to look back and think it was better than the Wild West. It was better than chaos. It was better than just fragmentation and conflict. So, like, that's what I would, if I was forced at gunpoint to make a prediction. That's what I would say. This marks China's sort of formal ascension into the world leader, into the main world power, and our more or less official decision to decline, to put up walls, to treat our country like it's a lifeboat, to keep people out, to subsidize and maintain old industries until they die. Basically, just your basic fascist, backward-looking, clinging to a hazily imagined past as the rest of the world vaults up around you. Like that would be my prediction. But then again, like you know, anything could happen.
Well, I've been thinking a lot about how regular people interact with the climate crisis. Obviously, we see the extreme weather that's unfolding this summer, that unfolds every summer. We see all the devastation around the globe. You know, we all live in this climate. We all breathe the air, and we breathe in pollution, and live with the consequences. I'm also thinking about how people, as so much of the Inflation Reduction Act will change or be repealed, how that will how that will change how people interact with climate solutions, right? And we talked about the jobs that may have been created, or you mentioned the electric vehicle tax credit, which is going away, and what that could have meant for people's daily lives. Like, I'm sure you get all kinds of questions from regular people who don't follow this every single day. Like, what do you think could change with how the average American interacts with climate solutions?
Well, I mean, I would say not much, and that maybe exposes a weakness of the political effort. Like the IRA was meant to move business, and by moving business, move politicians, right? And that stuff would have trickled down to ordinary people. Like people are going to notice if a factory is built down the road, but it was not primarily aimed at the public. It was not, it was not primarily aimed. I mean, a lot of the demand side tax credits were meant to make it easier for the public to buy clean stuff, and so it'll be incrementally harder for them to buy clean stuff. But they never experienced the IRA. You know what I mean? Like they never experienced the easier, so it's not going to
Mhm.
present it themselves to them as a difference. It's just clean stuff will continue to be a little bit more expensive than we want it to be. So like from an ordinary person's perspective, not much is going to change. And you could argue that more of the IRA, more of the climate push in general this time around should have been focused on cost of living, especially since sort of the whole theory and promise of IRA and the bones of IRA came together before the big inflation crisis that Biden faced, and so was not really designed with that in mind. Was designed for an older time of like, um, low interest rates, cheap money, and and low deficits. All of that changed, and it's very hard once you've got a big policy apparatus going to change course on it, so which all of which is just to say you can imagine a climate agenda that is more squarely focused on addressing cost of living issues for ordinary people in a way that they would notice much more. I'm skeptical that there's really anything that you could have done that would make such a huge difference in 18 months that it would, you know, push back against the very large forces that produced this last election. So, like, it's not a very satisfying answer, but like, it's going to continue to be a muddle for people. The clarity, the clarity that Ira might have brought will not will not happen, and so it will continue to be a muddle for people. And I'll just say one other thing. This is uh, no one's allowed to talk to me without hearing my information environment rant. So I'll just
I
say,
was
like,
just gonna ask you about it, David, so you might as well go down that path.
you could not have stopped me. Um, I mean, I feel like one thing we definitely should have learned in the last few years is that the the imagined feedback process whereby ordinary people experience their own material circumstances and draw political conclusions from those. This was the theory of the case for Democrats generally. I mean, almost explicitly when Biden was first elected, you saw some people saying, sort of like, Democrats seem to have lost hold of the information environment. Like, the right wing seems to dominate everywhere. It's like it's got the biggest cable news network, basically like CNN and the rest of, like, the mainstream press, like the New York Times and Washington Post, are in such cringy defensive crouches. They've been convinced that the left is the problem, so they are effectively echoing right wing frames. Right winger bought Twitter. They've got Facebook. They got they got Meta. They got Instagram. They have all the bro podcasts and blogs, and all the sort of manosphere content is all coded right now. Basically, like, the right now dominates the information environment. Um, and so you saw some people on the left saying when Biden was elected, the only hope for Democrats to succeed this time is to pass policies that change the material circumstances of voters in a way that voters can't help but notice. And then you can run on that. And that will, in some way, bypass the polluted information environment. If you can just change voters' actual circumstances, that will somehow get around the media problem. And that's not a crazy thought. It's not a crazy, it's not a crazy thing to think. Depending on what day you ask me, I more or less thought that was true. But the Democrats did it. And you might recall that, like, Biden produced probably the best economic recovery of any country in the world. Like, everybody faced this post-COVID inflation.
Right.
He navigated through it about as well as anyone could have, and specifically navigated through it in a way that was good for the working class and workers and unions. Like, he navigated through it in a progressive way that other countries did not do, and thus produced the best and fastest economic recovery of almost anyone in the world. But that was the material fact. But it turns out that, like, it doesn't matter. Like, people, even when it comes to people's personal material circumstances, they interpret that through the filters, through the frames of the information environment they're surrounded by. They don't, things like circumstances do not tell their own story. So, like, X happened, sure, but what does it mean? Like, what does it mean? Who did it? Why did they do it? What will it mean for me? What does it mean for politics? All of that does not tell itself. You've got to be there at that moment telling that story. You have to tell, even if you think you're doing something that is obviously self-evidently good for people, you still have to tell them. You still have to tell them that it's good and that it's happening. Like, there is no privileged arena outside the information environment. It is interpretation and framing all the way down, all the way down, which is like, and this is something I tell climate people all the time, because for a long time, climate people clung to this illusion that, like, when climate gets bad enough, when there are enough storms, or the storms are bad enough, or the floods are bad enough, or there's a drought that's bad enough, or two droughts in a row, or three storms simultaneously, or something bad enough that it will break through public ignorance and apathy about climate change. And I have been telling climate people for many, many years that that is a forlorn hope. Even if something super bad happens, it does not tell its own story. People don't automatically, instinctively know what it means. What are the implications? What will happen next? Like, what can be done about it? You have to tell that story. And so it turns out that that whole political theory of the case, we're just going to do right by voters and they will notice and reward us, is a total failure. That is a failure. People are drawing their conclusions and their internal worldviews and narratives from the information environment around them. And the left broadly and climate people broadly have got to figure out a way to get back in that game, or all else is lost. That's my information environment rant, which I uncork anytime anybody brushes past me on the street. Like, we can't not solve that problem. We can't throw our hands up at that problem. We cannot solve the other problems until we make progress on that problem. And this is true for climate policy too. It's true for IRA too. Like, a factory opens up down the street from you, you need someone to tell you. Biden and the Democrats passed a policy that resulted in this happening. The Republican Party opposed that policy. If they had been in charge, this wouldn't have happened. Democrats are trying to make good things happen for you, like this factory. And if you elect more of us, we will do more things like this factory. All that is not implicit. You have to say it. And to say it to people, you have to have access to them. They have to be listening to you. And the voices who are trying to tell people that are nowhere on Fox. They're nowhere. Like, these people, like most Americans out in the exurbs, in rural areas, suburbs, like, they just aren't hearing anyone say that. And Democrats have no ability to get to them. Like if the Republican Party decides something is bad, like they decide, all right, we need people to hate EVs, they can just swing the whole machine around at once. And all of a sudden, Americans are hearing bad things about EVs everywhere they look. Headlines are floating past, scary pictures, blog posts, podcasts are mentioning it. Like, it becomes ambient. It becomes ambient and inescapable. And so they decide, we want to turn people against EVs. They put it, they swing the machine around, and boom, within a couple of years, public opinion on EVs plunges. They can do that at will. They can do that to anything they want to do it to. They did it, a couple of years ago, you watched them do it to the Green New Deal. Like, the Green New Deal was proposed, thrown out into the public, didn't really have a concrete agenda attached to it. It was just like an idea. It was just a possibility, a container that you could put anything to, an incredibly powerful and potent container that you could have filled with anything. But the right defined it. The right turned the eye of Sauron onto it and corrupted it in the public's eyes. And there was no countervailing there was no countervailing effort. And they did it to the Green New Deal. They did it to AOC. They're doing it to Mondani right now. They did it to EVs. They can do it to anything they want to do it to. So, like, as long as they have that power and the climate people don't, you just can't win. You just can't win. You can't get around the information environment. People, that is what people absorb their worldviews from. You've got to be telling your story in their ear. And I would even expand beyond that. Like, never mind that, like, you need to tell people that, like, greenhouse gases emissions are bad and the world's burning up, and we need these clean technologies to solve this problem. We need to be making the case to people that, like, democracy is good and deliberation is good and reason and evidence and science are good. Just a lot of things that a lot of people like us take for granted and have taken for granted for many years. We just assume that, like, oh, everybody's on board with that. Like, it's so basic. It's so obvious. How could they not be? But like a large and very well funded movement has been out there for decades now, making the contrary case explicitly in multiple mediums, with multiple different kinds of spokespeople. And there has been no countervailing pro democracy, pro science. Like I can list a dozen think tanks off the top of my head that are devoted to the notion that government is bad. What is the Where is the think tank? You have like your immigration think tank and your gun policy think tank and your climate think tank, but where's just the like government is good and can do good things think tank? Whereas like democracy is good, and even though it's frustrating and slow, it's better than the alternatives. Just very basic stuff like that. We're not saying it. You're not making that case. And so we're growing a generation of people who are digitally native, who grow up in the swamp, the fetid, terrible, malodorous swamp of social media, who just don't know a lot of the things that we take for granted, the premises of our country and our worldview and our values. Just like we need to get a lot more vigorous and vocal. And the people with money on the left, on and in climate world, green philanthropists, need to get real about this and start taking it seriously and start funding. I mean, the way the right did this is through lavish, patient funding over decades. They didn't say, here's $1 million for a 1 year term. At the end of 1 year, I want 1,000-page report with benchmarks on what you accomplished with this money. You know what I mean? Like, anyone who has gotten philanthropic money on the left knows what I'm talking about. They like endless reports and check-ins and metrics, all of that. On the right, they're just like, go build it. Go build it and run it. Here's all the money you need. And we just have faith that over the course of time it will pay off. And of course it richly has. They won. They took over. You know, a lot of the things we're talking about, to me, in terms of policy, in terms of technology, in terms of all the other things we talk about, are kind of one level down from that, from the information environment. You cannot get any of those other ideas into people's heads without some control over the media environment. So people just need to be thinking about this.
Absolutely, and I think, if I'm no expert on this, people can do their Google searches. You'll find conservative media places where there will be climate misinformation or more right wing takes on climate policy to do these things like the scare tactics that you're talking about, and you'll find people who have been they were creating media that have been richly funded by people who want right wing misinformation out there, right? And they want tax breaks and those kind of things. And at the same time, I also think that if you look at a lot of non-traditional media right now, there are many big platforms that are not ideologically consistent or like more up for grabs, which is like very scary and also something to think about. Like I see Democratic politicians now going on some of these manosphere shows, and like I can't, I don't consume enough of that, David, to be an expert on like what's happening. But when I look at the climate movement, I'm like, what do experts like yourself do now? Like I remember when Andrew Dessler went on Joe Rogan a few years back, right? And I
Oh
remember,
my God, did he?
yeah,
I didn't even
yeah.
know about that.
And like I don't want to spend a ton of time talking about the Joe Rogan podcast, but
I'm
like,
sure Rogan was completely convinced by the end of the 3 hours. Like whoever's on his show convinces him of
yeah,
whatever
he just
they're
says,
there
yeah, that's
for.
really interesting, right? Like if you go on
Yeah,
that
nod,
show,
nod.
yeah, he nods and says, "That's great." Like Bernie Sanders goes on that show, it says whatever he says, and he's like, "Yeah, that's great." And JD Vance goes on that show, he says, "Yeah, that's great." But even in, most recently, God, he pulled me in talking about Joe Rogan. Ugh. Um, Even recently, Bernie Sanders was on, and they were talking about something climate related. A chart came out, and it was interpreted one way by Joe Rogan. Then Zeke Housefather wrote a long blog, say, "Hey, here's what's really going on." And it's just like but I just wonder, like, I do feel like there are a lot of audiences that would be receptive or be interested in what climate people have to say and wouldn't be as immediately dismissive as some more traditional outlets. And I'm wondering, David Roberts, when are you going on the Joe Rogan podcast?
I don't think I'm I don't think I'm the guy. I mean, I will say that the information, like the way to succeed in the information environment has changed in a way that Dems have not caught up with, that kept up with, and that the climate people haven't kept up with. Like Dems still try to do a bunch of polling, a bunch of issue polling, and then they poll test various phrases and slogans, and then they try to find just the right one that works just the right way, and then they try to get everybody to go out and say that. And if the way to communicate with the public is to make statements to mainstream reporters and then have those reporters convey what you say to their audience, then just all of you going out and saying the same thing to all of them is the best way to guarantee that that works. But that's not how things work anymore. Like above, no one trusts institutions anymore. Everybody wants authenticity above all else. And this sort of like scripted, poll tested language, everybody sees it coming now. Everybody knows what it sounds like. Like you just listen to the average like Democratic leadership talking on TV, and even if you don't have words for it, everybody instinctively sees that like these are there's something inauthentic about this. There's something fake about this. Like this sounds like a person reading lines to me, you know? And so this spontaneity and authenticity um are the key of the realm. So yes, like and you see this with AOC, like one of the few really good communicators. You see it with Mom Donnie too, like the ability to be loose and spontaneous. And like AOC can go on these Instagram live chats and just talk off the top of her dome for an hour or 2 hours. No establishment Democratic politician would do that. They're terrified of that. That would be every consultant in the freaking world would tell you never to do that. You might say something wrong that got, but like Trump has realized like you just keep talking. If you say something wrong, just keep talking. Like they can't stop and focus on the wrong thing you said because you just said a bunch more things since then. You know what I mean? Like you are setting the tempo. You are talking. You are in control. You are at the center of attention. It's a game of attention. How do you get attention? No one has to listen to you. Like poll tested, boring sounding language is fine if everybody has to listen to you. Do you know what I mean? But like if they can choose to turn the channel, you've got to figure out how to deliver the information or the thoughts or values or whatever you're trying to convey. You have to think about how to be interesting, how to maintain people's attention. And that's just something that the sort of like grifters and showmen who don't give a damn about truth or policy, they get that instinctively. They know that. Those are the people who are succeeding in the modern information environment, people who know how to get attention. So, what everybody wants and needs, and this isn't me, and I don't know who this is, but like what we need is for people to be communicating in those venues that way with an authenticity and a spontaneity and a humor and a self awareness that just sort of indicates that like I'm a person like you. Like I'm in this milieu too. Like I'm not trying to pronounce from above. I'm just giving you my rap. I'll say that. One thing is like the style of communication. We need lots more people who are a lot looser, a lot more spontaneous, a lot more, riffing off the top of their head. And I also think that ultimately, and maybe gets us too far afield and you don't want to talk about this, but I think ultimately, like, doom, doom, climate is coming. We've got to do something to avert the danger is just ultimately a limited message for a bunch of reasons. And I think, wow, look at this cooler, cleaner, better performing stuff. Look at the prosperity, look at the growth we could have. That is ultimately going to be a better message than climate doom in big terms and in and in small terms. Just the excitement of looking forward and being involved in building something is good. And I think, like, we could have a better world. We have the tools right now for a better world, and there's a sporadically over rich, comfortable, incumbent class defending its own interests between us and that world, right? The old guard is between us and the new world. That's a better, more interesting, more more galvanizing message, I think. Like, to
Yeah.
me, the clean energy revolution is the exciting thing. Like, that's genuinely exciting whether you care about climate or not. Like, even if you take climate off the table entirely, the clean energy transition is still worth doing, still going to have enormous benefits, and still really exciting even if you take climate entirely off the table.
Yeah, and I feel like it's so exciting, and it's so and I feel like the messages are there. It's just like it's just specifically for climate, outside of politicians, like, who are the messengers and who are
Yes.
like, where are they gonna go talk, you know? And I think, because again, I see what Pete Buttigieg is doing, I see what AOC does, I see what Bernie Sanders does, and, like, who in the climate movement gets invited, probably more than anything, but, like, gets to go and have those conversations to audiences that otherwise are not hearing anything, or they are hearing about when the sun goes away, the solar panels don't work,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
therefore we can't build
Yeah,
clean
and this is
energy.
why I'm talking about shifting from the story to not being a climate person. Like, those circles are going to be more receptive to an excited, forward-looking story of innovation where old people are in the way. Like, those the problem is that the environmental movement, I mean, this is a big, broad problem that I'm sure you're aware of, everybody's aware of. The environmental like, the climate movement basically grew out of the environmental movement and retains many of its habits, ideological presuppositions, policy preferences in ways that I think are deleterious, that are bad. And one of those is, like, this lingering pastoralism, this lingering idea that, like, humanity is sinful, we're messing things up, and the answer is to shrink, basically. The answer is to shrink our presence, shrink our impact, degrow, draw in, you know, um, that's very deep in the environmental movement, and that is profoundly out of step with the vibe among these manosphere types. And, like, the tech types, the manosphere types, the crypto types, whatever, that whole cluster of, like, those people, like, they don't want to hear anything about nature is good and mankind is bad and we need to shrink our footprint. That whole philosophy falls flat over there. You need people with that native tech bro sort of, like, yes, yes, mankind can do anything. We need to expand and go beyond and innovate and reach further and produce wonders. You need somebody with that mentality and that language and that vibe with the climate story in their back pocket, with the clean energy story in their back pocket that can merge those stories. And I think it's not I don't think that's difficult. Like one of the things I always say is like you talk to these tech people and like one of the things they all take for granted is that far from shrinking and becoming a pastoral, rural agrarian society or whatever, they want mankind expanding, desalinating the oceans and turning deserts into verdant, farmland and going to Mars and all these things. And what I would say to those people is like, if you have any big visionary ambitions for humanity, you simply cannot do that with fossil fuels physically. Like, it's not a choice, it's not a moral choice, it's not an aesthetic choice. Physically, you're going to destroy yourself if you try. Like, you're not going to be able to 2x or 3x or 10x the amount of energy available to human beings, which is what you need to do all these things with fossil fuels. You just can't do it. So fossil fuels are, in the grand scheme of humanity's great destiny in the stars, fossil fuels are a restraint, are an anchor around our leg. And the only way to get out of that is to tap into an energy source that is effectively inexhaustible. So if you have big sci-fi aspirations for humanity, you should be first in line getting off fossil fuels. Like, you should be
Right.
exactly the people who are like, we got to get other energy sources if we want to do any of this stuff. And there's just a little bit of that. There's a little germ of that now, but I'd like to see that grow and get a much bigger voice. It's not necessarily my vibe. It's not necessarily something I think I would sound authentic trying to sell, but I think there are people who could sell it, and I think there's a very receptive audience for that kind of thing.
Yeah, I wonder who it will be or how that will happen because it's like, 10, 15 years ago, you'd be like, "Oh, that person that can bridge the divide is Elon Musk," right? And I
Ah.
just you know what I mean? Like, like, think about if I went back in time and told 2004 David Roberts that, like, "Hey, one day a clean energy entrepreneur is gonna, like, host SNL and be like, in the
I
White
know.
House." Thought you would have thought, "Oh my gosh, the
I
way
know.
that's gonna accelerate clean energy policy is gonna be unbelievable," and yet the exact opposite has happened. I know you've covered Elon, when you were at Vox and through parts of your career, like, what have you made watching, all of this as I gesture wildly?
I mean, I can only gesture wildly in response. I mean, mostly Elon is about Elon. Mostly the story of Elon is about his psychology. He's a very broken person. I think he's probably neuroatypical, and in a way that was he was not surrounded by people who understood that and accepted him as he grew up. Do you know what I mean? So like, he's very defensive and dysfunctional about it, and he's like clearly desperate for human contact and human acknowledgement and human recognition, and he wants people to like him so badly, but he's so awkward, so bad. All of that about him personally, like probably explains most of it. But I think there is um a larger phenomenon of these tech guys who go into tech, make something, decide they're brilliant, and then glump off into politics disastrously. Like, the tech people, the sort of left-brained software engineer types, don't understand politics, and they're very bad at it. And I kind of think they should stay away from it. But like, Elon is absolutely exhibit A in that. Like, his understanding of politics is like a freaking 12-year-olds, and he's sort of speed running all the 12-year-old amateur mistakes about politics in very high profile in full view, and he's finally reached the I hate everyone, we need a third party
Mhm.
stage of
Which has
that's
never
like
happened
that's
before.
when you're about 14. When you turn 14, that's what like everybody goes through all these stages. But the thing is, if you're a arrogant tech bro who everybody blows smoke up your ass and tells you you're brilliant all your life, at every one of these stages you're like, I've figured out something that the rest of you idiots clearly have not, like you're just arrogant, absolutely arrogant and overconfident about every step of it. So he was like blundered into funding Trump, and now is like outraged that the Republican Party passed a bill that is top to bottom textbook Republican policy, exactly what you would expect Republicans to do. And now he's flailing off into a third party. Like, it's just embarrassing. Like, it's great what he did with Tesla, but I agree with you. Like, if we could have put a better person in that role, miracles would have been possible. Like, he could have done so much more for clean energy than he did. And now he's sort of like, I don't know, he's flailed around so much that he's almost like canceled out his effect in either direction. You know what I mean? Like, he's sort of flurried his way into neutral. Like, Republicans still hate EVs, and he didn't convince them about solar, like, so yes, but there will be more wealthy clean energy business people. There will be a bigger industry that has more power. It'll be more organized over the coming years. There'll be more and more people who, like, EVs are spreading, more and more people have them. Like, some of this stuff is just inevitable, and there will be more people. I think, like, we're in a position right now where it is grim, because I look around at the climate world and it's just like the same old people, like, including me. You know what I mean? Like, me still, like, it's just the same old people. We desperately need young blood saying different things, thinking differently, doing things that I can't sit here and tell you because I don't know. You know what I mean? Like, someone native to the information environment who can just approach these things in a way that is different and that can get attention and wake people up. But just like the basic, like, man is befouling nature, we've got to rein him in. That is so cliched now, so familiar. It moves no one. It reaches no one. No one cares. You know what I mean? It's just like an absolutely it's that there's no fruit, there's no juice left in that in that fruit. So we've got to find other
Hey, did I
ways of
lose
coming at this.
you there?
And I just have to have faith. Like, I don't see it. I don't know who it is, but there's probably like people on TikTok doing this for all I know. I wouldn't know. I'm not out there. I'm not a native
Hey,
to the new and information environment. I'm, you know, still clicking through emails and reading websites like a old guy. So I just have to have faith that, like, people are going to come up and figure this out. Like, there are going to be young people that are going to come along and be able to talk about this in a new way and be able to reach people in a new way. And it's probably not going to be sort of like the boomers at the climate philanthropies, or the crusty old Gen X guys like me still writing blogs who are going to figure it out. It's going to be it's going to be a next generation, and like, it will probably not make sense to me. You know what I mean? Like, I'm an old guy. I'll probably look at it and be like, "What? Like, why? What?" But that's just the nature of things. It's the nature of getting old. So, like, I just have to have faith that it will come.
well, I tell you, if you wanna hear new and exciting voices and new stuff that's coming out and how the clean energy revolution is happening, there is, no better place than to check out Volt. So again, our listeners can go to volts.wtf, which I will also put the link in our show notes. David Roberts, always great talking to you. Always great to have your insight on at this very weird moment, but wonderful speaking with you.
Truly. Thanks, Brock.